Welcome, I'm Errol Nazareth. Thank you for joining us for East York Days Behind the Music. I'm broadcasting live tonight from the historic St. Matthew's Clubhouse here in Riverdale Park, East, on the banks of the Don River. The Clubhouse, by the way, stands on territory traditionally inhabited by many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. There's been live music on the shores of these rivers and lakes for a long time, and tonight we carry on that tradition and get a chance to talk to some of the people making music here today. Speaking of living through history, 2020 is one of those years that is going to be remembered, and don't we know it? Not because of COVID, but because East York Days has a new format, as you know, because here we are and you are online, and you are safe at home. Now, thanks to the magic of technology, we will zoom into the homes and studios of the musicians that would normally have joined us live and get insight into their process, how they've been coping under quarantine, and what's next for musicians in Toronto and beyond. And now, let's get down to business and go behind the music. I think Andrea Ramelow is a perfect fit for this series of stripped-down performances because her music has always had, to me at least, a personal, intimate feel. Take her album, Nuda, that emerged out of a painful breakup. Andrea says, I needed to get into those really uncomfortable dark zones, and that's where this album grew from. And in the early days of the pandemic, Andrea wrote her first original Italian song. It's a gorgeous love letter to Italy and to her family and friends living there. She says that as a first-generation Italian Canadian, she always wanted to explore writing music in her mother tongue. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you, my friend. Hello.
How are you?
I'm okay. I'm hanging in, ebbs and flows, ups and downs, as I'm sure you're experiencing and everybody else out there is.
And we'll talk about that in a minute. As I said earlier, you write these really powerful, intimate songs. You wear your heart on your sleeve so well. Is it hard to open up and feel vulnerable when you write these songs, and especially when you perform them?
For me, it's the opposite, and for me, the process of writing them actually becomes a necessity and a part of my healing journey. So I think I mentioned this to you once before, maybe years ago when we were chatting. Unfortunately, I'm not the type of artist that has this routine that I get up every morning and over coffee I have the luxury of, writing a new song or at least practicing my writing, right?
Right.
We live in an expensive city, and we never really got into making art for the money, that's for sure. But for me, it's always been just sort of an aftermath of an experience that I've been through. I didn't even touch a guitar until I was 23 years old, which is much later in life to start a new career. I had been a dancer and an actor, and I was dabbling. I was an academic at university. I was getting a bunch of degrees, and my mom fell ill with stage 3 breast cancer.
Oh,
and
wow.
It was in that moment where I picked up this old sort of beater guitar that my dad had in the basement. And I needed to channel the anxiety, the fear that I had of losing my mother, because she was pretty, it was quite a scary time. And so I taught myself how to play guitar. And while I was teaching myself, because I've always sung and I've always written, just songs started pouring out of me. So that was my first foray into songwriting, real songwriting. And it just became a profession quite quickly. And I think that's the structure for me. It's like when, a world pandemic, a global pandemic happens, or when I lose a loved one, or my entire life and identity gets squashed, and I have to recalibrate and reimagine who I want to be. Those are the instances where I shine as a songwriter. And it's not even that I shine, it's that those are the instances when I'm really writing from a real place of instinct, and it just flows out of me. In between, I struggle. I have the quintessential writer's block. So, you could say it's a blessing to be able to express these emotions, but it's also a curse because I wish I could write a happy song.
Right. You will. But that's really interesting, because there are some musicians who have told me that it's therapeutic to get this out, to express it. But there have also been musicians who Joanne Mora, who's part of the series, at one point we talked about a song that was so personal and so powerful and very touching and pretty sad too. And we went back and forth on email, and I was like, "Are you sure you want to share this with the listeners? Because I want to do it as respectfully as possible, right?" Mm-hmm. So I think there's two things where people are like you're like, "I'm happy to share this," but there's others who like write it. It's powerful, but they're like, "I'm not sure if I want to share this because that's not part of the therapy." Am I making sense?
It makes absolute sense. I think the other part that I missed sort of communicating is that it's not, I write the songs for my own healing, but I share the songs to connect to other people's journey of healing. And it's just such a profound way of communicating with others, which is why I'm really missing the live music aspect right now, because, you know, as a listener of music, as a lover of music, I turned to music since I was a wee little girl, and growing up, especially as a teenager during those angsty years, these artists were not only just icons to me, but they helped me channel what I was feeling, because I heard about what I was feeling in one of their songs, because they too were experiencing, you know, this emotion or this experience, and we could share that together, and I didn't feel alone. And I think that, I mean, for me, I'm an emotional songwriter, right? I'm not an abstract songwriter or an abstract artist. I write about real life. I write about what I know, and I share what I know. And I think that conversation with the audience, it gets reciprocated, even though the audience is not always talking back. It's an energy thing. And then, you know, I've definitely gotten like slews of messages, beautiful, very vulnerable, and like messages from people sharing their experiences with me because one of my songs brought this out in them, or they think, you know, with Nuda, for example, that was a transitional time for me. My band Scarlet Jane was deciding not to sort of move forward, which was, you know, that was our life with Warner Music and Scarlet Jane for 5 years. And then a very key relationship fell apart, and it was a very public relationship. So I had to piece myself back together, and a woman reached out to me, and she had just had a miscarriage. And she told me that this album was like just transcendent for her. It just brought her through the pain and the agony. And it's so funny because there's nothing about my album in a sort of narrative format that speaks to anything of losing a child or whatnot, but the human feeling of loss and of suffering, you know. We want to feel like we can reach out. We want to feel like there's support around us to get us through those moments. And that's what art does, I think. That's, for me, what it does. And that's what I try to do for other people, which is why I make art for public spaces. So. And
which I'm guessing is the reason why you made that beautiful Italian song that I played on the show a few times, because you wanted to connect with the folks back in Italy. Talk to us a bit about that before we play it.
Well, I was definitely petrified because it was my first time writing in my second language. So, you know, my parents were both born in Italy. I'm very connected to it. So I'm a first generation Italian Canadian.
I'm sorry, I'm smiling because I can see where this is going, and they're going to be like, she said that word wrong and she pronounced it wrong, or you know what I mean?
Well, and also it's just having the grasp of a language that's not, you know, not your first, right? So I was terrified, but I always wanted to write in Italian, and it just so happened that at the beginning of the pandemic, you know, Italy was one of the first few countries that were really hard, and the rest of the world was far away watching to see what would happen. And we were all just in that state of fear and the unknown, right? The mystery of this disease that, you know, I think we're still in that mystery of this disease, but we've grown accustomed to sort of this new way of life, even though we don't love it, you know what I mean? Even though we're suffering, we're dealing with it because we're adaptable. And so I was devastated for this tiny little country that I have so much love and respect for, and so many fond memories. I have family there still. I have loads of friends, especially music friends, because I've toured there now a handful of times. And then one evening, a very dear friend of mine, who is sort of like an older sister to me, I always stay with her when I'm in Rome, she lost her mother to COVID. And her mother was in a southern province, and she never got to say goodbye. She never got to go to a funeral. She was alone in quarantine, complete lockdown at the time in Italy, in her apartment, and she had just lost her mother. And
Oh man.
I couldn't imagine that feeling, and my heart was bleeding for her, and I'm like, so the song came out of me in like 10 minutes, and I don't write songs that fast, ever. You know, I think it happened, maybe this is like the third time in my entire career. And it's a simple song, but I love what came out, and the message is powerful in English as well. The refrain repeats, "L'amore può salvarci," which means love can save us. And essentially it's about, you know, you can be across the ocean, we can be divided in this just giant universe of ours, but love will bring us together. It will get us through this time, no matter what. So it does have this message of hope, and yeah, and so that's,
so you don't just
have some hope there.
So you don't just write sad songs. You write hopeful songs as well.
Well, they sound sad. Yeah, they're sad but hopeful. Yes, I like that spin. You're right.
Let's listen to the song right now.
Sto pensando a voi, senza l'aria, senza la libertà, e tra di noi c'è il mare fatto di una lacrima che condividiamo, come la melodia che cresce pian piano. In questa guerra inaspettata, solo fantasmi stanno sulle strade vacanti, i nostri scompaiono, e senza un saluto o una preghiera, un bacio da Dio, almeno da Dio. Abbiamo dato per scontate notti stellate, migliorerà e passerà tramonto, alba, l'amore può salvarci. Ricorderemo ciascuna estate il sole sulla sabbia. L'amore può, l'amore può, l'amore può salvarci. Sto pensando a noi, la nostra forza e la volontà di fare un passo indietro per andare avanti, per semplificare, per mostrare al mondo come possiamo amare, come possiamo amare. Abbiamo dato per scontate notti stellate, migliorerà e passerà tramonto, alba, l'amore può salvarci. Ricorderemo ciascuna estate il sole sulla sabbia, l'amore può, l'amore può, l'amore può salvarci, l'amore può, l'amore può, l'amore può salvarci. Questa volta noi dobbiamo cambiare, migliorerà e passerà tramonto, alba, l'amore può salvarci. Ricorderemo ciascuna estate il sole sulla sabbia, l'amore può, l'amore può, l'amore può salvarci, l'amore può, l'amore può, l'amore può salvarci, l'amore può, l'amore può, l'amore può salvarci, l'amore può, l'amore può, l'amore può salvarci.
So earlier you talked about us being adaptable and about some of the challenges that we're all facing. It's forced many of us to deal with isolation, to slow down completely, but it's also increased feelings of depression and anxiety. And you spoke earlier, like your livelihood, it's all about being out there in the public and playing clubs and playing festivals and touring, engaging with fans. Andrea, how are you dealing with the new normal?
Well, Errol, if you caught me a few weeks ago, I probably would have been in a little bit more of a joyous, hopeful mood about it. Again, it ebbs and flows. I went through that period of extreme fear and the unknown. But with that, I used it to channel and to move forward and to write songs. So I would say that at the beginning of this lockdown and the whole COVID, pandemic, I was really creative, like just bursting, and I was writing songs. I'm working on a new album called My Quarantine Dream.
Nice, I love it.
It's all inspired by our life right now, and just the adapting to this life and what that's like emotionally, like you spoke of depression, but also I found myself living in dreamlands more so, like traveling in the space of my mind, because I do live at home alone, and without interacting with other humans, I started to feel like I was forgetting how to do that. So I lived in my imagination more so than I usually do, and I also started watching television shows and falling in love with characters as if they were real life people. So I used that to inspire songs, and I wrote and I recorded and I released a few, but then I hit sort of a block, and now I just feel kind of trapped. So I've been trying to be good to myself, staying in touch with loved ones, friends, and family. I've been trying to meditate and, trying to get a bike ride in. But in terms of songwriting, I'm just taking a little bit of a break because I did a bunch of it. And now I've taken on a job as a high school teacher at an arts academy. So I'm quite busy. I have my hands full. So that's one, adaptation. That's a way for me to, feed myself and pay my bills right now. It's not an ideal situation because I'm an artist first and foremost. So it's a sacrifice that I'm making that I don't love, that I've decided to do, but I'm doing it. So.
And I teach as well, and it can be mentally and physically exhausting sometimes, especially in this time of the pandemic, when we're doing stuff like we're doing now online, right? But if it means anything, you're picking up a new skill, and while it may not sink in now, further down the road you'll be like, wow, I did that. I was able to go through the whole semester doing that. And the energy that you get from the kids, as I do from my students, like we did a 2.5 hour class, and the class is supposed to go 3 hours, and we went out without a break, and they were buzzing.
Amazing.
So yeah, we all kind of farting around trying to like figure it out, right? But I mean, there's good things that hopefully good things will come out of it. I mean, in closing, my heart just goes out to musicians like yourselves, and I know so many local musicians in Toronto, as someone who wants to shows love to local musicians, and I just keep thinking like what's so and so doing, and how's so and so coping, and I hope things come back, because we definitely need you guys.
Well, I mean, we all need each other. That's the thing.
Oh, 100%.
A lot of what we do is reliant on human interaction, and meeting in these public spaces. So yeah, I just wonder, I don't want to think too far ahead and fill myself with worry, but I do hope that, a new normal comes out of this that allows us to go back to playing live music and going back to touring and part of this joy of being a musician is you get to meet such fascinating people all across the globe. You get to travel, you get to share, and it's just like it's a part of our fiber. We need it to keep going and to keep creating, and you can only be in a hole for so long before you just bury yourself in but yeah, it's important to stay hopeful, and connecting this way, it's better than nothing, for sure.
It's better than nothing. And on that note, thanks for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did.
Absolutely. I love chatting with you, Errol. You're doing amazing work, and your voice is literally the voice of Canadian radio. So I like that I also get to see your face and hear your voice at the same time. It's great.
Thank you. We should tell CBC that to use that as like a tagline, the voice of Canadian radio.
I think it's a great tagline. It should be yours, yeah.
Take good care of yourself.
Thank you as well.
All right, take care.
Bye everybody.
Yeah.
See ya.
And now while we get ready for our next guest, take a look at this short video about one of Eastern Art's other amazing programs.
There's about 21 screen prints that are here that were all made within a series of workshops around the East End. And we're partly trying to respond to incidents of racism and racist violence, which unfortunately keep increasing in Toronto. The workshops all involve a conversation, a lot of writing and thinking, and this exercise called mind mapping, and then ultimately collaborative design and cutting out a stencil and using a silk screen to make a whole bunch of posters. And then we're also having a bigger group conversation around racism as a system and a much bigger structure, and trying to kind of unpack and dissect how we're part of that.
I hope people come in here with like an open mind, so that once they look at the artwork, hopefully maybe even ask questions about it, then they can kind of leave here with like a little bit more information about something that they may not have known.
Performing on other people's records for more than 20 years, Luis Simao stepped out of the shadows and released a wonderful album 4 years back. Actually, it was one of my favorite albums of 2016. It's called Aluge, and it's steeped in traditional Brazilian and Portuguese rhythms and melodies. Well, not only is the music beautifully executed, but there's a story behind every song, which is another reason why I like it. The album is centered on the theme of duality, light and dark, life and death. It's my pleasure to introduce one of our city's most in-demand session players and a very classy guy indeed, Luis Simao. Welcome.
Thank you, Errol. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
You're a very busy man at the best of times. I'm curious, Luis, how has the pandemic affected your workflow?
Well, not unlike many of my colleagues and musicians around the world, it brought everything to a complete halt. I play accordion with Kieran Oluwalia, for example. There were 3 tours that fell apart immediately, an American tour and 2 Canadian tours that would have occurred in April, July, and August, respectively.
Wow.
Yeah, and then, all sorts of local work, of course. And, I'm in the process of making another record. And just because of my own psychological state, I think, throughout the pandemic, I stopped working on it. I'm getting back into it now slowly. I'm feeling motivated, and I'm very close to the end. So, but yeah, that's it in a nutshell. I mean, just everything just disappeared within days, really. So,
including inspiration, right?
Inspiration, yeah. I mean, I was actually in Portugal between March 8th and March the 16th, recording overdubs for the record that I've just mentioned with a great friend of mine and colleague, Carlos Bernardo.
Amazing player.
Amazing player, Brazilian who lives in Paris, France. So we decided to meet up in Portugal and spend about 5 to 6 days recording little, overdubs and whatnot for this record. And we parted ways. He went back to France. I came back here. And again, I'm sure my story is similar to many musicians' stories, but I was sort of in a state of shock, not exactly understanding or believing what was going on, and trying to be optimistic, thinking, well, maybe this will last a month or two, or who knows. Of course, it hasn't. It's been prolonged, and now we see what it is. So yeah, the inspiration. It took a while for that to dissipate. I'd say I was still motivated to work on the record for a few weeks, maybe 3 weeks or so. And then it all sunk in, when I realized my daughter, who's now almost 5, I realized she wouldn't be going back to school, and that I'd be at home without any employment,
Right.
So, yeah.
Brutal, man. When introducing you, I talked about one of the things I loved about our luge was the theme that ran through the whole record.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering now, given the times we are in and what it's forced you to do, and how it's forced you to rethink the way you create and your game plan, your workflow. Will we see a theme in the next record as well, or you just want to have something completely divorced from all the madness that's going on?
That's an excellent question. So, as I mentioned, the record I was doing the overdubs for back in March, because it's over 90% complete, it has its own vibe, its own theme. I would say it's less of a concept album than a luge was. That really dealt with, as you already mentioned, light and dark, life and death. This one is, I wouldn't say is as deep, although there's a current or a constant theme through my work over the last 20 years, which is to explore the folk music of Portugal.
Mm-hmm.
So that's more present, I would say, on this upcoming record. Ironically, that album is taken, as I mentioned, due to lack of inspiration and all of that. It's taken a little bit of a back seat, and the wonderful artist and singer-songwriter Patricia Cano.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I, we have been collaborating on a handful of songs, about 4 songs that we're writing together. And some of them do deal with some of the themes that we've been faced with during this pandemic. So I hope that music is ready to be released within about a month's time. So the added challenge, of course, and the skill set that we're all developing as we are here chatting on Zoom is now that more than ever, music really benefits with the accompaniment of videos. So that's the added skill set that I've been trying to get together and acquire is, not only recording music at home and all of that, but also capturing it on video and stringing it together and hopefully being able to create a new type of product. So that in itself is exciting, although it's challenging, it's exciting to be embarking upon that.
It's always a silver lining, right?
There has to be. I mean,
and if there isn't, you got to create it.
You got it. We've got to create it. I mean, you can only go so deep into the valley before you have to start to climb out of the dredges, right? So it's been a tough time, and I personally feel that, and this is just me, right? I'm not speaking for anyone else, but because of my own journey throughout this pandemic, psychologically speaking, I really need to pull it together and to start climbing out of it and be productive. Yeah.
I wish you luck with that, because your music brings so many people joy, and it's heartbreaking, and I spoke with Andrew as well, about how painful it is, and sometimes you just feel like, this is all I can do, this is all I've ever done, and this thing has just upended my life, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And again, you're right, I'm not we're not alone. I mean, you're part of the music world too. It affects, it affects everybody that's connected
Yeah.
to the arts, right? It's
Yeah.
it's a large blow that we've all been dealt, certainly.
Let's hear some new music that you recorded recently, Louis. Can you just introduce this track for us, please?
Absolutely. So this is called Du Val à Montanha, which translates as "From the Valley to the Mountain," and this is a poem by the great Portuguese author Fernando Pessoa. The music is not mine. It was written by Jardel Caetano, who's a wonderful Brazilian musician. But the arrangement is mine, and a version very similar to what we're about to hear will be a part of the new record, and I look forward to getting that to you as soon as possible.
I look forward to hearing it.
Vala a montanha, da montanha ao monte, cavalo de sombra, cavaleiro monge, por casas, por prados, por quinta, por fonte, caminhais aliados. Vala a montanha, da montanha ao monte, cavalo de sombra, cavaleiro monge, por penhascos pretos, atrás e de fronte, caminhais secretos. Vala a montanha, da montanha ao monte, cavalo de sombra, cavaleiro monge, por monte sem fim, sem ninguém que o conte, caminhai em mim. Da montanha ao monte, cavalo de sombra, cavaleiro monge, por quanto é sem fim, sem ninguém que o conte, caminhas em mim, caminhas em mim, caminhas secreto.
Great track. Tell us what we just heard and saw, and more importantly, since we're talking about being behind the music, is there a story behind that song, Luis?
There is, again, because it's not my poem. I've tried to research it to the best of my knowledge. It's classified as one of Fernando Pessoa's esoteric poems from the later period in his writing career, and it's essentially the story of a rite of passage, and the protagonist is sort of a warrior monk, and the journey to the mountain has to do with transcendence. So that's in a nutshell, without getting any deeper, that's the message behind it.
I also like how you talked about like the translation was from the valley to the mountain, and earlier you talked about how you have to pick yourselves up from being in a funk or feeling blue to like getting back to the space pre-COVID times, right, for musicians. So I found it interesting that we played that track whose title was From the Valley to the Mountain. It's a nice metaphor, right?
I agree, and there is a tinge of irony, given that, again, going back to how I spent March 8th through March 16th in Portugal in a hamlet. I mean, I can't even call it a village. It's such a small locale in the mountains of Portugal. So in some ways, I'm thinking that maybe that'll be the title of the new record, From the Valley to the Mountain. So you've just inspired me here.
Good. I'm glad. Instead of just talking about another song about isolation, I think people love that, because I think if you just say that, people know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Given what we're dealing with right now. Absolutely. Thanks so much for hanging out with us, Luis, and I wish you all the best, and looking forward to new music from you as always, man.
Thank you, Errol. It's such a pleasure, and I love what was mentioned earlier, that you are the voice of Canadian radio.
Oh.
So we need to hear more of you. So thank you for everything.
Thanks, man.
All right.
Take it easy. Okay, yes. You too.
Before we go, special thanks to the City of Toronto for their ongoing support of East End Arts, a wonderful organization, all of our individual and corporate donors, and the artists and businesses who invite us to work with them throughout the year for East York Days and other incredible initiatives. If you want to support East End Arts, you should. In our mission to unite, inspire, and enhance the neighborhoods of East Toronto with more arts programs supporting local artists, you can make a charitable donation by visiting eastendarts.ca/donate or reaching out to us on your social media platforms of choice. Thanks to Andrea Rameau and Luis Simon for joining us, and thanks to you for hanging out with us today. I'll see you next week when we'll meet two more amazing artists. Remember, wear a mask, wash your hands, and have fun.